your potential. That's the topic I'd like to discuss with you for the next short window of time. I'm delighted that you are with us this afternoon. You might be maybe watching this on a recording if you're not able to join us live. But I just want to confirm that you can hear me okay. So we're going to use the Q&A box rather than a chat box. We're going to use the Q&A box. So you might just pop into the Q&A box. If you can hear me, just type "I can" into the box so that I'll know everybody's getting me loud and clear. So if you can, excellent. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Ronan, Rolando, Dave. Oh, loads of people on. Excellent. Brilliant. Super. Thanks for that. Okay. And maybe we'll use the Q&A box because I'm going to ask maybe some questions as we go through, just to get your insights and opinions and thoughts on things. But we'll ignore the chat box. Let's just use the Q&A box so I'll know then that's the place of choice. Okay, so I'm going to ask you just 3 questions to begin with. And each one has just a unique answer. So if your answer to the first question is yes, I just want you to type in "for sure" into the chat box or into the Q&A box. So if you're answering positively in the question as in a yes, just type "for sure." So who here in the last 13 months has had a day or two where it might have been hard to get motivated? If that's you, just type "for sure" into the chat box. If you've had one or more of those days in the last year, just type "for sure." Excellent. So lots of for sures. Okay. Second question, and the answer to this one is "I am." Who here is looking forward to a bit of normality real soon? If you are, just type "I am" into the chat box. If you're looking forward to things maybe going back to the way they used to be, just type "I am." Even more people are saying "I am" and "for sure." Okay, excellent. And last question, and then we'll kick into the session. If you have some goals in your life that maybe you've had to park for a period and you're keen to get back on track with those goals, whether it's in business, whether it's in pastimes, whether it's in studies, whether it's in anything outside of any of those areas, if you have some goals, a goal or 2 in your life that you're keen to get back on track with, that maybe you now can't control at this time, but that you're looking forward to being able to control, just type "yes, indeed." Yes, indeed. If you have goals that you're keen to get back to, just type "yes, indeed." Wonderful. Okay, and thank you everybody for showing up. Looks like we've a great crowd here, which is super. So let's get into it. I'm 53 years of age, 53 plus a couple of months VAT, and I can assure you I've had some of those days in the past 13 months for sure. I've had quite a few of those days where just harder than other days just to really pick ourselves up. Okay, but I'm also delighted to be here. I did some work with DCU, and I want to thank Rob and Molly and Theo from DCU who have supported me in being here today and support me behind the scenes. And I think the reason we did some work with some of the students in DCU a number of months ago, and I think the reason I'm back is because maybe Theo said to himself, "Gosh, I'll give him another chance. He couldn't be as bad the next time." So maybe that's the reason I'm here. But I hope that's not the reason. And I hope you get some value out of today. I want to speak about unleashing your potential. And I want to share some things that I've learned in my life. And let me just explain maybe a couple of reasons where I've kind of learned to tap into my own potential, but maybe more importantly, to share who I used to be. So once upon a time, when I was in my mid-20s, I was a lot heavier than I am today. And I was a very heavy smoker. That's a photograph taken when I was 27. I'm the guy on the right-hand side of the photograph. Actually, does anybody recognize the person on the left? If you do, just type his name into the chat. Very famous man. Anybody recognize him? Yes, indeed. A couple of people. Yes, Seve Ballesteros. For those not familiar, he was the greatest golfer in the world. In that photograph, I'm 4.5 stone heavier than I am today. And I'm not remotely as fit as I am today. In fact, 15 years after that photograph was taken, I managed to run 32 marathons in 32 consecutive days, which is a full marathon of 26.2 miles, one in every county on the island of Ireland. So I feel that in terms of my potential and my fitness, I really feel that I've really reached way beyond where I was in my mid-20s. I also used to be terrified of public speaking. And I mean pathologically fearful of public speaking. And now I'm very comfortable. I actually, in normal times, obviously not in COVID, but I regularly speak in venues like this. I've spoken there quite a number of times in that venue. And that's the convention centre, if you're not familiar, in the city centre in Dublin. And I've spoken in those kind of venues on a lot of occasions over the last 10 or 11 years. And that's somebody who used to be terrified of public speaking. That is now my office in many ways, where I get to spend, because I'm a full-time professional speaker. Now, I want to take you back and I want to share with you a series of things. I've learned so many things, but I want to share just in this short time that we have together, some of the very high level, very simple, but very powerful things that I've learned. There's nothing rocket science here, nothing unbelievably unique here. I think you'll probably, maybe align with what I'm going to share. But I'm going to, as we go through it, maybe just share where it's worked for me, how I've done it, what the value has been. And then you can decide if these are of value to you, if you're interested in getting to a higher level in whatever it might be in any area of your life, whether it's in fitness, whether it's in your finances, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your studies, whether it's setting up a business, maybe it's bringing your business to the next level. I think these principles will work for almost any of those things. So the first thing, as a result of that photograph that you saw there earlier on with Sevi the golfer, I decided to go back to exercise. I used to play sport as a child for sure, but I hadn't done much exercise from the time I left school to the time that I was 27 years of age. So I decided to take up running as a pastime, as an activity, as an area of focus at the age of 27. And I literally did 5K the very first day. Now it was a bit of a shuffle, but I got there. If I'm being honest, I kind of ran 2.5K in that direction, then I had to come home. It was pretty much that simple. But anyway, I did 5K, and then over the next weeks, months, even years, I stretched myself to kind of 10K, to 15K, and even beyond that. And I began to look at other areas of my life. The fitness kind of woke me up. And I'm going to come back to this at the very, very end, the impact of being physically fit, not necessarily into sport, because sport, I believe, is a very unique personal decision for some people, and lots of people are not into sport. But for me, exercise has been a game changer in my life. In fact, it's now non-negotiable in my life, because it helps me in so many areas, because it began to reawaken me. I began to get more energy in my life. I began to get happier in my life. I began to get more confidence in my life. And I was linking all that back to the catalyst for that was exercise. And that's why I sustain it right to this day. I've exercised today as well. But this also motivated me to kind of look at other areas of my life, because I began to get happier. And I decided to go back to college, but I began to achieve at a higher level. I got fitter. I started to maybe make more money in my job because I started to get promoted. But the first thing I learned was this, and it's very simple. If we want to get to a higher level, if you're interested in maybe reaching your potential, and this is a really simple principle, but I didn't do this for years and years and years. So just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. But if we want to get to a higher level, my first principle, we can talk about it all day long, but unless we actually move, well, then we will stay where we are. So like exercise, fitness, all those other things I mentioned, they were never going to come to me. We have to go to them. Again, I appreciate this is really simple, but it eluded me for years, because for years I wanted to do it. I knew I had a challenge with my weight and with my health, but I didn't do it. But when I changed, everything slowly started to change. The second thing, so I got fitter, I got more focused, I started to get more ambitious. And I discovered, and I went back to college. That motivated me. I went back to college to do a part-time course in the late 90s. I am that old, in the late 90s. And I started to achieve at a higher level. And what it taught me was the second principle. If we do move, then life does reward us. Life rewards us if we're willing to challenge ourselves, if we're willing to move towards our goals. Life rewards effort. I became a more confident person. I became a better educated person. I became a more ambitious person. Now, I'm into the late 90s. You might remember golf was a big thing in my life. I learned a really big thing at the end of that, just before the end of the last century. It just sounds like such a long time ago now. But I learned the value and the importance, perhaps, this is if you're interested in realizing your potential, because we can do so many things in life. But if we're willing to do this, narrow our focus. What specifically, if I was to get really focused in an area of my life? And at that time, I got really focused. Golf at that time was a really important thing to me in my life. And I felt that I'd never fulfilled my potential. I'd been playing golf from the age of 8 until I was 31. I was 31 at this stage. And I said, you've never achieved your potential. And yet I love the game so much. Whatever it is you're into, golf was a big thing. It's not now, but it was a huge thing in my life when I was very, very young and right through my 20s, even into my 30s. It was a huge thing in my life. I played a lot of golf, but I knew I was leaving my potential behind. So at the end of that year, for 1999, I applied this principle. I also got very specific. I was making a big mistake in terms of goal setting. And this is a principle I teach in a goal setting workshop. For years, my goal was to be a great golfer. But that's very foggy. That's very ambiguous. What does it mean I want to be a great golfer? It's like saying to a pilot, take me to America. The pilot won't take off with that information. She will insist on knowing exactly what city, what airport, what terminal, what runway, and what gate. And also they'll want to know, when do you want to get there? So the importance of putting a deadline on a goal. And I applied all those principles in that year, 1999, something I dreamt about from the age of 8. I defined what a great golfer was. I came up with some specific metrics around that. I said, that's what a great golfer is. So I got very focused for that year. And I achieved it in less than 6 months. And that taught me the power of narrowing focus, because I really felt in that short time, I reached my potential. Now, it was another thing to stay there, but I reached my potential. I set the numbers, I set the targets. And when I got really focused and set very specific goals, not just the targets, but also specifically what I would do, I specifically said, here's what I'm going to do to get there. Because a goal without a plan, I read it in a book once, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So I came up with a plan, I moved, and I got rewarded for that effort by narrowing my focus. Now, this taught me the importance of getting focused. So I began to get really into goal setting in my life. And I come up with areas of focus. And I come up at the time with 5 areas: family, work. Family and work were 2 of the things I put down. I was also now big into running. This is 5, 6, 7 years later. I was now big into running. It was becoming a really big thing in my life. And so family, work, I was kind of up to like running for up to 2 hours. I was able now to run for up to 2 hours in one sitting. So that's the level of fitness I got to. And it became a really big part of my life. Not just that it was important because of the fitness. I loved it as well. So I saw the value of putting this in my radar. This is another area of focus. So we talk about realizing your potential, unleashing your potential, but maybe we need to have areas of focus. So for me, family, work, endurance sports. And I put in 2 other areas as well. And I said, I want to reach the highest standard of all, because I felt I'd reached it in golf. And the different standards I've discovered are poor, average, good, and excellent. Poor, average, good, and excellent. But look, there's one more left. Everything we do to standards. Poor, average, good, or excellent. But there's another one, which I'll tell you about in a second. There's nothing I believe that we don't do to a standard. Drive a car, brush your teeth, eat food, play golf, take notes in college, whatever, listen. whatever it might be. Even when we sleep, you hear people say, I had a good night's sleep, I had a bad night's sleep, they sleep into a standard. Poor, average, good, excellent. But the highest standard of all, if there was one higher standard than excellent, I want you to tell me in the Q&A box, what do you think it is? If there was one, I believe there's one standard higher. What do you think it might be? What's your prediction for it? Let me know in the chat box. Oh, I like this. Yeah. Your best or mastery. Yeah, your personal best. I believe that's what it is. It's the very best of your ability. You see, you could be in school or college getting 80% in second gear. I could be getting 50% in sixth gear, having to bring that level of effort to the engine of study. So that tells me that the best of your ability is the highest standard of all. I could be just working 10 times harder to get a score that's even lower than yours. And I learned that principle. So I come up with these areas and said, I want to reach the very best of my ability in work, reach my potential, not excellent, but my potential in relations with my family, in endurance sports. I said, I wonder what's the limit of my potential? So that's where I came up with a goal, an area of focus. And I decided to go and do a marathon. So I did a marathon and I achieved that. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I was able for that, but maybe there's an even higher standard. So then I got into triathlon and I got into kind of all the different levels of triathlon. I'm not sure if there's anybody here into triathlon. If you are, just type I am into chat so we'll know if I have any fellow triathloners in the room. Anybody done a triathlon here? Nobody coming into the box yet, so maybe not for everybody, but I did. So swimming, cycling, and running. And I got up to what they call Ironman triathlons. And that's where you swim, cycle, and run for a really long time. So, sorry, the cat has just come into the room. That's why I've just got disturbed. If you can hear the cat, I hope you can't. So she came into the room anyway. I'll leave her alone. She came in through the door behind me. Anyway, it's live, as you can see. So, with that in mind, this is my first ever triathlon. And you'll see me actually in the orange hat in the center. That's where I am. You can just see me in the orange hat in the center. But that was my first ever triathlon. And that took me over 12 hours to do it. But now I really felt, if you told me in that photograph with the golfer Sevi, I wouldn't have believed that this was possible. But it was, and I managed to achieve that. I got an idea. I felt maybe there's an even bigger level here. And that's where I got the idea to do 32 marathons in 32 consecutive days. But on this point here, narrowing our focus, I remember being at a seminar once, and it was a business seminar. And the speaker had a great line, but you can apply this to anything. He said, if you want to make your business big, make your focus small. And maybe if we want to make success big. So I got very focused on extreme sport. I got very focused on that. And so I was kind of drifting away from golf. Whereas before I might have tried to do 2 or 3 things. And that could be great. That could be somebody else's definition of success. But now I wanted to achieve my limit in this. So that's where I got very, very focused. And that's the finish line of 32 marathons in 32 consecutive days. Now, I want to share with you some more principles, which I'm really keen that we would cover. If you are interested in getting to a higher level, maybe if you're interested in reaching your true potential, I want to share with you the number one thing I believe we need to master. I firmly believe our success in anything is determined ultimately by mastering one thing. To bring it to life, I'm going to invite you to do an exercise. So I'm going to ask you, it's an easy exercise. It's not overly taxing, I can assure you. But I want you to give me some feedback as we journey through the exercise. Okay? So I'm going to invite you to fold your arms just normally, please. Fold your arms normally. Okay? So I'm going to assume that you have that done now. Okay? So now what I want you to do is when you're ready, I want you to fold your arms the opposite way. Do that now. I want you to fold your arms the opposite way. And when you're ready, in the Q&A box, I want you to use a word or two, one word or two, to describe the feeling when you went to do it the second way. What words would you use to describe the feeling of when you went to do it the second way? Just give me some feedback when you're ready. Oh, Sean, I've just seen your tough event. Gale Force indeed, yeah. Yeah, so what words? So I'm seeing awkward, uncertain, difficult, poor coordination, confused, uncomfortable, challenging, awkward, uncomfortable. Yeah, had to think consciously, conscious effort. It was wrong, different, awkward. I love those words. Who here has ever learned to drive a car? If you have, just type I have. If you've ever learned to drive a car, just type I have. So lots of people have learned to drive a car. Yeah. Do you remember the feeling when you first started? Is it fair to say it felt wrong? It felt different. It felt awkward. It felt uncomfortable. I really had to consciously think about it. Is that a fair comment to make? But now you've gone through that feeling, that period, that transition to get to your potential at a higher potential. Tougher than I thought, indeed, yes. But that's the principle. Our success, I believe, in anything, in terms of my fitness, for sure, in terms of having a terrifying fear of public speaking, I believe our success in anything is determined by how, here's the key word, uncomfortable. Our success in anything is determined by how uncomfortable we are prepared to get. Let me bring this to life for you. What did this mean for me? So I want to bring you into a room, this room in particular. I walked into this room 16 years ago. And I walked into that room to do a formal presentation, my first formal presentation. Now, I do it now. It's my business now. It has been this is my 11th year doing this. But at that time, in a completely different business, I was very much a different, even my thinking was completely different. But I walked into that room in September 2005, pathologically fearful of public speaking. It was incredibly uncomfortable. Remember the line, or success in it. Now, I hope it wouldn't, whatever you're doing, wouldn't have that same level of discomfort, because it was exceptionally uncomfortable. But life rewarded me for putting myself forward. Now, I didn't go from there to where I am now, like in the click of a switch. It's been a 16-year journey in so many ways. What I did do was, 4 years later, you might say, well, why would I do this? Why would I get uncomfortable? Why would I challenge myself? 4 years later, oh boy, was I glad. Remember, the life rewards us for effort. 4 years later, I was so glad I got uncomfortable 4 years previously. Because in the business I was in, I couldn't make it work, and I was looking for new ideas of what I would do for a living. So this is in 2009. That hotel shot in the last picture, that was 4 years previous, 2005. So 4 years later, I was so glad I got uncomfortable, because now I knew I had a skill set that I would not have known I had if I hadn't got uncomfortable. And from there, I got the idea to be a professional speaker in the area of goal setting. I started small. My first talk that went in that hotel was 4 people. 4 people was my first ever talk. My brother got married 2 years later. Much bigger audience. Still terrified. But I did it. I then did some talks in some local schools in 08 and 09, just around business. Uncomfortable, but I got a great feeling doing it. And I really enjoyed it, and I got great feedback, and the students said they were getting great insights in what the topics I was talking about. And then in 2009, I made a decision to go into the business of goal setting, speaking about goal setting. Now, I decided to become a professional speaker. And then I've been fortunate since then to speak in these kind of environments, to speak in beautiful venues like these, speaking overseas in different countries as well. And if you had told me 16 years ago this would have been possible, I would have said, no, impossible. But what's the secret? And it's the principle of this. This is just a metaphor. What I'm doing is just a goal, but I believe it will work in any area of your lives. It works for me in fitness. It can work in relationships. It could be in any area of life. If you have an ambition to build a business, to get a dream job, whatever it might be, maybe financial success. Goals are different things to different people. But if you want to get to a higher level, maybe if you want to find out what you're truly capable of, I believe it's determined by how uncomfortable. Now, over the last 10, 11 years, I've delivered over 2,000 presentations. And I'm very privileged to work with some amazing companies. I've worked with some of the biggest companies in Ireland and some of the biggest companies globally that happen to be based in Ireland and overseas as well. I've spoken in front of so many audiences in so many venues. And I would have thought that was impossible. But how did I get from even 2009, 2010 to where I am today? Let me share with you something I've tried to do in every single presentation. Every single one. I've had a goal, and it's number 4. It's CTCI, and what CTCI stands for is a commitment to continuous. What? What do you think the I stands for? A commitment to continuous what? Absolutely. And do you know the beauty? It only needs to be microscopic. But if you put a microscopic improvement on top of one yesterday, and then tomorrow you put one on top of today's, and then the next day you put one on the one that you did tomorrow, you put another one on top of it on Saturday or whatever it might be. If you do that in every presentation, it's astounding where you can get to. And it's just a metaphor it can apply in any area. So I've had this commitment to always try and be 1% better, always uncomfortable. As long as something is really important, if you want to have an ambition to get to a higher level, get the area of focus, get uncomfortable. And that's my secret. I would not have been hired to do some of the work I do now 10 years ago, not a hope. Even some of the work I do now, I would not have been hired 5 years ago to do it. And commitment to continuous improvement can encompass many, many, many different things. It could be in terms of insights. It could be in terms of education. It could be in terms of my speaking style, how I communicate, the design of the programs and the workshops that I do, always trying to make them just a tiny bit better, not giving the same standard, always upping it by just a degree. But that means I got to be feeling uncomfortable every week or every month. It can't feel comfortable like the first folding arms did. And I believe the way you'll know that you're truly committed to getting to your potential is if it feels awkward. It doesn't have to feel outrageously awkward, but if each week feels a little bit different, a little bit, challenge yourself to get to the next level, whatever that might be. At other times it might be bigger leaps, so it might be more effort. But if it feels normal, well, then that's a sign maybe that you're standing still. So there are 4 things, and I want to give you a 5th now. And then I'd love questions. If there was questions, I'd love to take questions as well. But my final thought, and I mentioned this earlier on, my final question to you is this. And actually, let me just do a quick poll here. If you are, just type Y for yes. Who here is into regular physical exercise? If you are, just type Y for yes. Okay, so quite a few people. Oh, lots of people. All of a sudden, it's gone crazy. Excellent. Okay. And here's a question. Have you ever done exercise? And if you have, just type I have, where you opened up the door and you're about to go out to do whatever exercise is to you, and the weather is lousy and you're feeling not so good. Okay. But you go out in the exercise. If you've ever done that, if you've ever gone out, even when the weather was lousy, just type I have into the chat box. If you've ever gone out when the weather is less than good, just type I have. Lots of people again, excellent. But here's the thing, when we're going out there, our motivation, oh my gosh, this is going to be tough, it's going to be hard, oh, do I really want to do this? Tell me, as you're coming in the door, the people that have just typed I have in the last 15 seconds, how do you feel afterwards? What's the feeling it gives you afterwards? What would the testimonial be? Amazing, brilliant, fabulous. Your words, not mine. amazing, brilliant, fabulous. Yeah. See the value of physical exercise. And I now directly link physical exercise to my performance in any area of my life. Now, I didn't say sport. I didn't say running. I didn't say football. I didn't say biking. I didn't say swimming. I said exercise. I just happen to exercise through running primarily. But I believe the value. Here's a quote from John F. Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States. So I'll quote him in a second. It's physical fitness is my fifth recommendation, whatever that is to you. JFK, 35th president, said physical fitness is not only one of the keys to a healthy body. Physical fitness is not only one of the keys to a healthy body, it is the basis of a creative and dynamic intellectual activity. I got that the very first day. I just got, like, the very first day I took up exercise. It was like somebody just woke me up, like they put the jump leads on my life again. And I instantly, the very first day, I remember feeling better. I said, that's interesting. That's because you exercised. And thankfully to this day, and it's different things for different people. For somebody, it could be a 10-minute walk. For somebody else, it could be an hour in the gym. It's different. It could be disco dancing. It could be Pilates. It could be anything. It's whatever exercise is to you, but the value of it, not just because maybe it might be fun, but the value of it in helping you reach your potential in any area. I believe it, for me, it's got to go on the list of recommendations. If you would agree with this, maybe you're already aligned with this, just type absolutely, Gerry. If you are, it's just an opinion at the end of the day. But anybody here? And I see a question there already, so I'm going to turn to questions in a minute. But just if you agree with physical exercise, the value of it, I'm seeing totally. Yeah, excellent. Anybody else? Please repeat the JFK quote. Of course I will. Yeah. Physical fitness is not only one of the keys to a healthy body, it is the basis of a creative and dynamic intellectual activity. That's the quote. Yeah, lots of people agree with me. Tons of people agree with me. Absolutely, yeah. So I felt compelled to put it here because for me, it was a game changer. And now I actually exercise every day. Now, sometimes it's incredibly modest. Like I usually kind of take a day off every week, but I would still walk 2 or 3 miles, even in that. Other times it could be an hour, maybe 2 hours, but probably on average, maybe 45 minutes to an hour a day. 30 minutes of exercise. 30 minutes of exercise is 2% of 24 hours, 2.08%. And yet for me, it unlocks everything for me. Okay, I love this. It has never failed to take me from a low place to a whole new one. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, just that just even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe different things for different people. Thanks for that feedback. Okay, so we're going to go, we're kind of 25 minutes or 35 minutes into the session. So let's turn it over to questions. Just before we do, I have 2 final thoughts, and we're going to do some questions now. And I'm not sure if Mark, maybe you're coming in this section. I'm not sure if you are. If you are, please, delighted to have you in it. But just 2 things before we do the Q&A. For me, it's not just about realizing our potential, but for me, it's one of the added values is who you become as a result of it. I've become a more confident, more ambitious, definitely happier person because I pursue goals and maybe pursue my ability in whatever the goal might be. Also, I remember last summer, I usually do a marathon each year, but obviously we couldn't do a marathon last year. You know, the Dublin Marathon, for example, was cancelled. But I remember in June of last year thinking, gosh, you know, this is a period of your life. And we kind of had some idea that the next 6 months is probably going to be written off for many of us in many ways, in many contexts. And I remember thinking to myself last June, gosh, you know, Gerry, you could still run a marathon. Just run your own marathon. And I even set myself a somewhat ambitious time to do it. And I said, I'm going to run a marathon the same weekend as Dublin would have been held. And I did all the training, and I came up with a specific training plan that would get me the time. And it challenged me. It was uncomfortable. Not a personal best, but it was uncomfortable nonetheless. And you know something, why would I do that? Because goals give us purpose. And I actually had a wonderful 3-4 months training. And I don't do it for the day itself. It's more the journey. I'm sure you've heard that, you know, it's about the journey, maybe not necessarily the destination. And for me, it's about all the joy and fulfillment and happiness I would get in that 3 or 4 months rather than just on the day itself. So that for me is another reason maybe to just challenge ourselves in different areas of our life. Mark, would you like to come in and join me in this part?
Yes, thanks, Gerry, and apologies for missing the beginning of the session. Listen, it's great to have you on board, and a really interesting discussion, which I think has given certainly me a lot of food for thought, and I think everybody here as well. So listen, what we're going to do, as you said, is really work our way through maybe some of the questions that people might have. So I'm just looking through the chat box here, and I can relay these to you.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so just seeing here, actually, yeah, I'm scanning up along. So a question from Sean. So what do you say to people? What do you say to people who mistake competitive sport with fitness? I worry a lot of people in Ireland think that if you can't kick a ball, that sport is to be avoided, and I think that's a fair comment. So what's your view on that?
I exercise number one for me. That's why I exercise. So for me, I would take ownership of that myself. Listen, I'm doing this for myself. And so what other people might define as success, I might have a completely different opinion of it. So that for me would be, my goals are for me. And sometimes I might do it in, you know, I don't tend to get involved in team sports. I kind of did as a kid, but I kind of was into golf, which is kind of a solo sport, and running and triathlon is kind of a solo sport. But for me, I think the ultimate competition is against myself. And yes, I might set myself a bar to maybe beat somebody or whatever it might be. But you know, ultimately the very best of my ability. And that's why I love to set targets around that, what it might be. And I learned that in the golf, to set my own target, and I managed to achieve it. So for me, it would be just ultimately not maybe. There's an old line that I sometimes use when I'm helping people with confidence around public speaking, which is ironic that I teach that now. And a line I teach, Mark, is from Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the first lady in the White House from 1933 to 1945. And she said, nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. And for me, it's maybe allowing other people's opinions. I'll decide my own opinions on what success is in that, rather than you've got to be reaching this level or whatever it is. Well, no, I exercise for myself, or these goals are for me ultimately. So that would be just some thoughts on that one.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. I think that's good. Very good advice indeed. Another question that's come through, Gerry, is somebody's kind of stating that they keep stumbling through their career by putting their own goals aside to help others achieve theirs. How can they change this?
Yeah, I guess that's a really interesting question. And I guess without having too much information, it might be hard. I could maybe just give, at a high level. But one example or one suggestion might be, if you're asking a question, well, then maybe you feel that there's something that you do want to do. And maybe just to communicate that to the other people, just share that with them. Listen, I'd love to support you in this, but maybe is it possible maybe that I could just lessen that by a little bit to give me a little bit more time to do my thing? And I think if we explain why that's important to you, well, then the other person might be more understanding.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. A question just came through, just to reiterate again, maybe what CTCI stands for.
Yes, absolutely. So the first one was, we've got to move. For things to change, we have to change, so we got to move. Life, I found, rewards us for effort, narrowing our focus, and commitment to continuous improvement. That's what that one is, a commitment to continuous. And if we want to reach our potential, until we feel we're not there, well, then if we just have a commitment to continuous improvement. There's a great story, Mark, you'll enjoy this one, about a man called John Neighbor. And John Neighbor was in college as a freshman, 18 years of age in America. And he had a really big goal, which was he wanted to win a gold medal in swimming in the Olympics. And he knew he wasn't at that level. He was way behind the time that he would need to be. But what he did was he set himself a target over 4 years to get there. And I'd love to go into it today, but I'll kind of narrow it down. What did he do? He decided, this is the kind of shortened version of the story. Every day, 4 hours a day, for 6 days a week, for 10 months of the year, for 4 years, his goal was to get faster over 100 meters by 1/1200th of a second. And he knew if he consistently did that, if he got to 1/1200th of a second faster, and then another 1/1200th of a second faster, and if he did that 4 times a day on average, 6 days a week for 10 months of the year for 4 years, he set himself a target of a time. And he said, if I can swim that 100 meters backstroke in that time in 4 years' time, then I'll have achieved my potential. And it might be a good way of winning a gold medal because it'll be a world record. So that became his strategy. It was a commitment to continuous improvement. And he did it on average 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, 10 months a year for 4 years. And 4 years later in Montreal in 76, he did it and he won a gold medal using that strategy.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. I think that may actually be a precursor to the questions coming after this. So somebody's asked, in your experience, do you prefer setting large goals or smaller incremental ones? And this way, I think the last answer may point to that to some extent. But the person also points out a very interesting podcast, I think, that was done by Johnny Wilkinson. Is the High Performance Podcast, where he mentioned that winning was just really a byproduct of achieving all the small goals that he set for himself and the team. So again, the person's just wondering on your thoughts around that query around large versus incremental.
Yeah, so I'm all for large goals, but ultimately, what's the plan? You know, and also, and funny, even before you said that, I was thinking, okay, well, any goal I think I've ever achieved, maybe at a high level, it's thousands and thousands of small goals joined up. That's what it is. You know, like we don't use the marathon metaphor, if I may. You decide to run a marathon, but you don't go and run 26 miles. You kind of put 6 months or 12 months training into it to be able to do it. It's all of the training sessions, all the speed sessions, all of the long runs. You know, there could be like 200 things that you have to do to be able to run a marathon, number one, and in the time that you want to run the marathon. And that principle applies to anything. It's just a matter of maybe bite-sized chunks. And I think if we look at that, you know, John Neighbor being a case in point, he had this really big goal, which was to be able to swim. I think the time he set himself was 55.5 seconds. Now he was way off that. But that's where he came up with his calculation. So when you think about it, whatever 4 times 6 times 10 times 4 years is, that's how many micro goals he had to do to get there. I personally don't know of any other way. Now, sometimes we might make significant progress in a short period of time on top of maybe smaller steps, but ultimately it's a matter of all the things joined up that kind of lead us to the bigger goal. And no better man, I would have thought, than Johnny Wilkinson, given what he achieved. And if he's given that advice, it sounds like great advice to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I presume there's also the element of, you know, those incremental goals are achievable, you know what I mean? Whereas the long-term goal, it's perhaps hard to see the achievability of it, but once you take it in those bite sizes, it kind of makes sense. You can achieve those and build towards that larger goal. Listen, really good insights there. Now, an interesting question that's come through here actually is, how can we apply these goals that we might set for ourselves, for example, to college work, where somebody mightn't be terribly motivated to complete the work in question? And I guess, you know, we have this particularly with broad programs where, you know, students are introduced to lots of different discipline areas. Some they'll be very interested in, some unfortunately, you know, just not their cup of tea. So how do you kind of apply what you've kind of talked about to those kind of areas where you're perhaps less motivated?
So next Tuesday, I'm doing a goal setting workshop in a corporate environment. And I'm going to be kind of taking people through the steps of goal setting. We haven't covered that today. It's more high level principles today, but the steps of goal setting. So one of the first things I'm going to be doing is get them to define specifically what success looks like. You know, like we want to grow our business by 12.5%. Now, we're very clear and we want to do it in this time frame. Okay, but that could be a very challenging goal. And we might be very motivated next Tuesday evening to do it because we have the energy of the conference or whatever it might be. However, what about commitment when things don't go well or when we're demotivated or we hit a wall? This is the next step. When we're setting that goal next week with that client, the second stage, I'm going to be inviting them to answer is one unbelievably important question. I'm going to write the question as one word. And it's a brilliant thing to look at. at any stage in a goal, you could still do this if you're coming to the end of fourth year in DCU, or in the first week of, in your first year. You could do this at any time, but a great time to do it is when you do set out on a goal. Ask yourself this one question: why do you want to go?
Yeah.
And you see, the beauty of the why is the why. If your why is strong enough, and usually people have a very good reason. People want to go to college. Why do you want to go to college? What's the outcome that you want to achieve? What's it all about? You see, if I have a really strong why, maybe it's to set up my own business when I'm 22 or 23. Maybe it's to give me financial security for the rest of my life. Maybe it's because I want to get this dream job. Okay, now we have the why. Now I then might go into a lecture of a subject that I either don't like or that challenges me. But if it's something I've got to do, well, then that's an extra test, because if I got to pass that, so then what tools can we use? Well, ask yourself this: well, why is it in my interest to commit to this? Why is it in my interest to be motivated in this? Well, because my dream job is coming out the other side of this, and it's dependent on this. So it's the power of understanding your why. And maybe when you hit a wall, when your motivation isn't what it might be, maybe when your confidence is low, reconnect with this. Reconnect with this. And I remember years ago, I was studying and I failed an exam. And my motivation, my commitment was really being tested. So I went back to this and I reconnected. Well, why did you sign up for this course in the first place? And when I reconnected with that, I got emotional, because I had a really, really strong why I went back to college in the first place. Now I've hit a wall, but I used this strategy. And when I got emotional, emotion creates motion. And that's why I said, okay, it's not what happens, it's what I do about it, because the emotion stirred that up in me, the motion to go back and reapply myself to be able to sit the exam again, which I did, thankfully. So, before we embark on it, or at any stage, just, well, why am I doing this? Why do I need to get motivated here? And maybe to make a contract with yourself before you give up on something, reconnect with why.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that is really good advice. And of course, it's not just in the kind of study setting. I think there's lots of areas where you sometimes have to do things where you're perhaps less motivated. But that why question and that motivation is really, really important to focus on. Excellent. Another question has come through, which kind of links to the importance that you put on kind of physical exercise. If you are going through a very difficult time, other than exercise, what helps you, say, get back on track? And like, how do you motivate yourself to reach the end, regardless of the level of difficulty? So I guess, yeah, kind of two questions there in a sense, but outside of exercise, are there any other things that people should think about in terms of getting back on track?
I remember, it's a great question. I remember years ago, and I'll use an example of something that in sport, but it's the principle of the strategy of what did I do. So I remember, this was 7 or 8 years ago. I had two goals in terms of running. I wanted to do a big ultra marathon, but I wanted to do an ultra marathon as part of my training. So I did this ultra marathon early in the year, and it was a big training day, but it was a big effort to be able to complete it. And in the time I was trying to do, but it was always kind of a training day. And I'm now, having done that, I was 7 or 8 weeks out from my ultimate goal. But I did this interim goal, and if I'm being honest, for the next week, 10 days, I felt completely flat. I was tired from it. I was recovering from it, but I couldn't get my mojo back. I just couldn't. I really struggled. And I think it's because I put such effort into that. Yeah. And what I did was, to get back on track, I visualized. I created an image in my mind of what was awaiting me 7, 8 weeks out. I brought it to life in my mind, and I was going to be running the main goal in this beautiful place. And Mark, I closed my eyes and I put myself there, and I visualized the last few miles of that one that was still in my future. I said, Gerry, how do you want to feel? Like, you're definitely doing, how do you want to feel doing that when you're in the last 2 or 3 miles of that? And you're going to be in this amazing location that I used to go back to year after year. It was one of my holy grail places. It's the one place it was in Connemara, the Connemara Ultra Marathon. That was the event. This stunningly beautiful place. And I used to run the Connemara Ultra for the challenge, but also the beauty of the environment. They were my two reasons for doing it. So I visualized this stunning environment, and I visualized, I really want to have a great day. Well, then, Gerry, you've got to get back on track. You've got to pick yourself up. You've got to get back training because the clock is ticking. So I'd encourage people to visualize, maybe, and it could be around the why. Visualize, why do I need to get back on track here? Why do I need to pick myself up here? And again, just that emotion, that visual could be something that really could support people.
Excellent. Excellent. Great advice again. And listen, I think this probably feeds in as well to some extent to this next question, which is, how important is it to feed your goal as you move through the journey towards finally achieving it? I think it's a very nice way to phrase that question, actually. So, how important is it to feed your goal as you move through that journey? Because there will be ups and downs.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think maybe in terms of maybe to understand that in advance, there's going to be ups and downs here. Like, it's no surprise. So if we've already contracted, listen, there's going to be days when I'm going to be low or flat or not motivated or injured or whatever it is, or struggling with resources or whatever it is. If a goal is going to test us, there's things are going to happen. So maybe decide those in advance. So when they happen, just consciously in that moment, say, well, hang on now. This was always going to happen. These are the extra tests to find out how much do I really want this goal. These are like mini exams that I need to sit here. So just to, maybe not to be surprised when these things happen, to respect and understand that those things were always going to pop up. Like if I want to grow my business by this much, I'm guaranteed to hit some odds along the way. So maybe not be surprised and just to embrace that. And maybe, I think there was a question there about failure. Somebody was asking about failure. It's maybe my definition or my focus around failure is, and I learned this from a guy, I read it in a book, and a chapter in the book was called Sometimes I Win and Sometimes I Learn. And this wonderful book written by a man called Colin O'Brien, he was talking about lessons in business, lessons in life. And he said, sometimes I win and sometimes I learn. So my attitude to failure is, hang on now, it's only a failure if I see it as a failure. This is an opportunity, because I know some of the biggest failings I've had in my life, as I reflect now, that's when I got the best growth, when I looked at it long term. So en route to our goals, feeling along the way, these things are going to happen. So just maybe, if we contract it in advance, and don't be too surprised when it happens, and realize, okay, it's how we respond here is ultimately that it matters. I think it might help to navigate us through those more difficult times.
Very good. Excellent. And just conscious of time, but if okay, I think we've got another 5 minutes or so. So there's still a few more questions, but a really good one has come up here, I think, which is, can you talk a little bit about confidence? And I guess the role that confidence plays in goal setting. And also, do you advise setting goals in a physical manner? And how do you check if you're achieving them? So
okay, so let's focus on the first one first of all. Okay, so confidence. There's so much I've learned about confidence. But here's two things. Okay, I could think of 10 off the top of my head, but here's two.
Yeah.
If I want to be a more confident swimmer, I've got to get wet. I'm very unlikely to get it standing on the side of the pool. So it's about putting our toe in the water. Simple example on that might be, say I want to be more socially confident. Say I've got significant anxiety around social confidence. One example might be, if you use the analogy of a swimming pool, and I want to get to that deep level of confidence. Okay, well, maybe the starting point is, what's a shallow end? What's going to get wet, but challenging nonetheless? It might be to go into a shop and just have a 20-second conversation with somebody behind the counter. That could be a toe in the water. It's not going to overwhelm somebody, but it just, and you have the freedom of walking out. If for any reason you feel it's not going well, you can just turn and walk out. But it's a nice, safe end of the pool. So that's an example of one thing we could do. But here's another, this is an exercise I do a lot more. And it's a very simple exercise. Now, I would do this over an hour or two. I'm going to do it in 60 seconds here, but I would need an hour or two to do it justice. I get people to say, I want the confidence to be able to do whatever the goal is. I want the confidence to be able to play the guitar or play the piano to a grade 4 level. Okay. So I'll say, well, how difficult on a scale of 1 to 10 do I think that's going to be? Well, 1 being rather easy, 10 being so difficult. Okay, so I'll give it a number. How difficult do I think it's going to be to get to that level? It's going to be a 7 out of 10. It's going to really challenge me, not outrageously challenge me, it's going to challenge me nonetheless. So I give it a number. And then what I invite people to do is this, to reflect on their lives and to write down. And again, please, everybody watching this, maybe I would be an hour. There's a lot goes into this. I'm kind of giving you a very, very, very like 60 seconds. I would get people to write down things they've already achieved in their life that took significant effort and or they were exceptionally proud of. So for me, for example, overcoming a pathological fear of public speaking, like that took significant effort. I'm incredibly proud of it. If I was to give that a number, I would actually give that a 10 out of 10. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. But even, even keeping business going in when the last recession was very difficult for me, I'd give it a 9. Now I compare the number. And if I'm willing to put this value on myself, it's a great starting point, I believe. If we're willing to put this value on ourselves, it's a very simple exercise, but it proves the one thing we want to achieve is a 7, but we might have higher numbers already achieved in our lives, which I believe can give us the confidence to realize, well, maybe I can achieve this goal. And you might say to me, well, hang on now, Gerry, this is a 10 and this is a 9. So the thing I want to achieve is 10 out of 10. I've only ever done a 9. Here's my simple reply to that. Look how close you are. It's only a small step. So there's just maybe 2 things that might help people with confidence.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks, Gerry. That's brilliant. And listen, maybe just last minute or 2, I might just go to one last question. So unfortunately, I might have to jump 1 or 2 questions that also come in. But I think there's an interesting one that's come in here about someone who often gets overwhelmed when goal setting, when they sit down to do it, because there's just so many facets of life to try and optimize. And so any advice there in terms of how do you deal with that when there's so many things that you need to try and
yeah. So one simple, but I totally get that, and I know exactly what that feels like. Is to write down all the things you need to do, everything, even just getting them out of your head onto paper, onto computer. I think you'll already feel a little bit more at ease. So just to create a list of, well, what's all the things that I'm feeling overwhelmed by? What are all the things I got to do? So I write down listing all these things. Okay, 2 ways we can go here. Do the first one. And I believe just by doing the first one, by kind of getting into that pool, already the overwhelm, because sometimes we can talk about things, just by doing something, it can give us the confidence and the energy and the motivation to maybe move to the next thing. But standing on the side, talking about it, it's just going to get more and more a bigger issue in our lives. You might also write down all the things that you feel you need to do and then prioritize them. Well, what's the number one thing I need to be doing? It might be this one here. So then go and do that one. And I think just by doing that, all of a sudden, then you've got lesser things. I can't think of any better strategy than that, other than moving, doing something. And I think you will feel more at ease. Here's one other simple thing on this. I used to think, Mark, that the most effective use of my day was to completely fill the day. And I learned this from somebody else. And he taught me, no, that's not the way to do it. Here's a better way. Fill, and it's not a number, it's not an exact number. He recommended, Gerry, fill about 60% of your day. He said the challenge with this is, if this is 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he said you might get 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock done. But what happens if something unexpected happens and you lose an hour here? This takes longer, somebody rings you and needs your time. So you lose this hour, you don't get this done, you come back to your desk and you do all these things, but this is the thing we think about going home. So what he learned, and the problem with this is, if the next day is also full, my list gets bigger and bigger, and this can lead to overwhelm. So it just gets bigger and bigger. So what I've learned is this: maybe come up with a smaller list, something that's much more realistic, that doesn't fill the day, and maybe achieve 100% of that, and then go into doing the extra things. It's what I call underselling and overperforming. If you do that, if you achieve 100% of the 60%, at the end of the day, you feel super productive, even though technically you've got less done. And, achievement is so much psychological, and it's how we manage ourselves. There are some simple things that I've learned.
Brilliant. Gerry, that's excellent. Definitely a few things I'm going to take away there for myself, and no doubt others as well. So listen, thanks again, Gerry. Really insightful, interesting talk. And again, I'd just like to thank all of the attendees for coming to the session. Some really interesting questions, as you can see, that came through from people there. And obviously, you know, people are thinking about this problem of how to set and achieve goals, and I think the talk has given some brilliant insights. Just to maybe wrap up, just to advise that the GETDigital, it's been a busy week, but it's going to continue into tomorrow for final day of sessions. That's starting at 9:15, which will feature Frederick Imbo, who is an actor, producer, and motivational speaker. He'll be sharing his insights into how not to take things personally. So listen, again, just to thank you again, Gerry, for what was an excellent session.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.